I'd like to start off by welcoming you to the inaugural session of this season's Brown Bag Lectures. I think we're in our 33rd or 34th year. It's probably the longest running public programming effort of its kind in the Okanagan, maybe in the province. So, yeah, give yourself a hand. It's always a challenge, but a pleasurable challenge to find speakers and topics that interest the public, interest you guys, and get you out here. And but we've always had such a fantastic response. So thanks again. Chandra usually does the introductions, but she's got a child care issue, so she headed out. So anyway, today for our first lecture, we're really pleased to have Blake Laven, Director of Development Services for the City of Penticton. Blake has been with the city, I think, about 13 years now, right? And not always as director. That's his recent his position at the moment. And as you know, he's going to be talking about various development initiatives that didn't happen, and the whys and wherefores behind it, and whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, but I'll leave that to Blake to elaborate. Anyway, thanks again, and Blake Laven.
Thanks, Dennis, and very honored to be part of, I didn't realize what a legacy the Brown Bag Lectures were, so it's, yeah, very honored to be part of that legacy. I've been to several of these lectures myself and always found them really enjoyable, and happy to be contributing to that legacy today. So the title of my presentation, Missed Opportunities or Dodged Bullets. We have a number of projects, and I use 10 very loosely, so there's actually quite a few more, but I've grouped them into 10 sort of groupings, so you'll see as we go through. A little bit about myself to start with. I am a registered professional planner. I studied history and political science at Simon Fraser University, and I studied planning at Dalhousie University in Halifax. I worked in this restaurant in downtown Vancouver when I was an undergrad student, and this is where I really learned about urbanism and fell in love with development and planning and shaping cities. I worked a breakfast shift. The restaurant was called Elixir. It was at the Opus Hotel at the foot of Davie Street. And it hosted a lot of developers would go there for their 7 a.m. breakfast meetings, Bob Rennie and John Evans, and they would talk about things like mixed use, that I had no idea what that was, and development and height and all this really cool city building stuff. Got me super excited into it, and that's why I applied for planning school and ended up in Halifax. That's me on my first day of planning school, completely bewildered. I've lived in 4 different provinces. I've been all 10. I've never been to any of the territories, but I hope to one day. I love the Okanagan. This is someplace after my parents moved here after I graduated high school, and visiting here in the summers, it really captured my heart, and I knew this was a place that I wanted to end up after I was finished my schooling. Always thought I'd end up in Kelowna, larger urban center, more action going on, bigger place, but I really fell in love with Penticton. I did live in Kelowna for a number of years as I worked in Vernon and started my planning career there, but migrated to the south and haven't looked back since. And I really do think Penticton is the most amazing city in Canada, and considering all of you live here too, I'm sure you agree with me on that point. I live in, I think it's the best neighborhood in the city, on Papineau Street, with my wife and 2 kids. This was from the Terry Fox run this weekend. I don't know if people know Doug Allward. He lives in Penticton. We were really lucky to have him out at the Terry Fox run. He drove the bus that Terry Fox ran alongside in the Marathon of Hope. So he was Terry Fox's best friend growing up. He shared some thoughts of that before the Terry Fox run, and it was very special, I think, to have him there. We actually have a kids book, and this has nothing to do with my talk, I just think it's really cool. We actually have this kids book that Doug Allward features prominently in, so the kids are really excited to meet him in person. And if you didn't know, today is Talk Like a Pirate Day, which I'm not going to do, but I asked my kids for a joke about pirates, and my 7-year-old had more of a risque one about covering somebody's booty, but I'll share the one my 4-year-old shared, which was how did the Pirate win the basketball game with a hook shot? There you go. Good. I started with the City of Penticton as a junior planner in 2010. I've had a few different roles with the city. I've been in my role since 2019, which was a challenging time to start a new job. I was just getting into things and the pandemic hit, and development, which we thought was going to fall off a cliff, actually went crazy everywhere. And I think that's something we weren't expecting. I think we were, real estate development is very cyclical. I think 2016, 17, 18, we were on this kind of high, and we thought 2019, 20 would be down years. Boy, we were wrong. I love being the Director of Development Services. I still have a role in the planning department, but I also oversee our building department and our social development department, as well as bylaw services. So a larger portfolio, but today I'm here not necessarily representing the city or my division, but talking about planning projects that over time were approved and didn't go forward, or were proposed and weren't approved, or cooked up by the city planners themselves and didn't go anywhere. On the screen here, we have a picture of the city vaults and archives. We have two main vaults. The one on the left is our civic property, so everything's divided by civic addresses. Most of the stuff in there corresponds to housing and apartments in the city. And then our upstairs vault is our planning vault, and it's got all sorts of great stuff in it. And some of the plans that I found that I'm going to share with you today are from that vault. Our files go back to about 1950. Our city hall was built in the mid-1960s, and files were transferred over. But anything past 1950, you got to talk to Karen at the archives, and she'll help you out. Okay, we're going to start with the least controversial one first. Squaw Lake Park. I'm not going to start with the water slides. I do want to touch on that quickly, but lots of plans for Squaw Park over the years. I'm just going to share one with you. This was the Squaw Lake, the suggested development plan from 1967, which really focused on intensive resorts, intensive residential, like making Squaw Lake this area where tourists are going to come and stay, restaurants, hotels, motels, that sort of stuff. Obviously, we have some motel there, but I think if you picture Squaw Park now, it's much more built for the residents of the city. There's a lot of residential close by, but obviously the vision in the 1960s was the marina with the restaurant and hotels, and really making this a place for tourists to go. Lots of parking. All the plans in the 60s had lots of parking. So yeah, I just overlaid that plan on an aerial photograph of today. So that area is mostly single family housing. There's one apartment building and one townhouse development. But as you can see, the vision in the 60s was to have hotels, resorts, restaurants, the whole deal, much less intensive of a use today. Sticking with Squaw Park, there was a very ambitious acquisition plan that was in place for a number of years, probably starting in the late or mid 1980s. It was enshrined in the 1990, adopted by council in 1990, based on the beautification committee work, was to acquire land to make Squaw Lake Park bigger. Very successful on Elm Avenue. So you can see in this photo from 1994, a lot of single family houses are sort of peppered in to this area. And today they're almost all purchased by the city and turned into parkland. There is a grouping of 4 houses up there that are, we own all of them except one, and I believe we do have a first right of refusal, so that acquisition plan was very successful. The remainder of the acquisition plan was focused on Sudbury Avenue and South Beach Drive, and I think council and committees in the 1990s had a vision that all the single family housing along there would get purchased by the city. That plan was reduced in scale with the parks plan in 1992, and with the purchase of the Coburn property. And unfortunately, the only property that was purchased was the Coburn house, which is highlighted in red there. And ultimately, that plan was abandoned in 2021 when the OCP was amended, and council decision was made to share that. Ultimately, it was just too expensive to purchase all of those properties, and when you look at the tens of millions of dollars it would have taken to purchase those, balanced against other park investments that we could make in the city, the decision was probably fairly easy, but yeah, sad day, for sure. Okay, this was the Skaha Marina in 2008, before this proposal. So the city lease on the Skaha Marina was coming up, and they put out an expression of interest to have somebody take over that lease, and we're really excited about this proposal from the Trio Marine Group that came forward to build a new restaurant and a reimagined marina, as well as utilize some of the other parkland for some amusement uses, including a water park. And I think the planners of the day and council of the day really excited about the plan and entered into agreements with that group, the Trio Marine Group, to realize this vision. Fortunately, didn't have the opportunity to discuss it as thoroughly with the public as likely should have happened, and the result was the passions for that park really came out in the community, and probably the largest protest in Penticton because of a civic decision occurred. This was actually our CAO, Eric Sorensen. He was our city manager for about a year. This was his first day on the job, and I'm sure he was wondering. We were at a council meeting upstairs, and everybody was looking out the window, and I'm sure Eric was, he only lasted about a year. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but a really good lesson in listening to the public and going through proper procedure when you are making decisions on public land. And I think it's something that the city learned very well from, and we do a much better job of participatory decision making with our Shaper City program. You could probably do a whole lecture, a couple hours just on this topic alone, but I'm going to close it off here just to say that the city made the decision to cut ties with Trio Marine. There were some funds that were paid to get out of the agreements that were signed, but it was probably the right thing to do. We've adopted a new Skaha Lake East master plan, and that plan is getting built out now, and you've seen the Dragon Boat Pub that was open this summer. Speaking of water slides, if you're not familiar with this property, this used to be the Skaha Lake family camping. For decades, this was a camping and RV area, and it had a big water slide proposal on it as well in 1980. So this was something we found in the archives when we were researching that property for another development, which I'll speak about in a minute. But this proposal, I don't think it went to council or made it very far. They did make an application to the city. Not sure if they were approved at all. It was really hard to find any information about this, but we did find some really cool plans for a water slide in 1980 for that property. And just a zoom in of the plan. I think that was one of the economic development strategies of the day, was to build water slides to attract people. And yeah, 30 years later, it looked the same as it did when the water slides were proposed. This was a proposal for that same piece of property, and I'm going to talk later in the presentation about all of the condo craze that captured Penticton in a big way in the early 2000s. But I want to highlight this one to start with. This was a very, very ambitious project. I think it was 280 units all told. 3 large towers, 15 stories, 16 stories, and 11 stories, with a restaurant and all sorts of resort-style amenities to go along with it on that property on South Main. The designs didn't get very far along. I think when they started looking into some of the geotechnical considerations, it really put a halt to this project, but applications were made to the city to rezone this property for the use that you see on the screen. So it would be, yeah, change the nature of that area for sure. Oh, not sure what happened there.
What year was that, right?
I think that one was 2004 or 5, somewhere around there. Yeah. Just sharing our geotechnical mapping. So red means bad. So that property was right here, and putting that type of density there, I think that close to a fairly unstable cliff was why that development didn't go forward. And today, Skaha, I can't remember what these are called, but we had High Street, their development company, that built really lovely scaled 6-story rental buildings that frame the park very nicely. And that is what is there today. This is an interesting one. So who wouldn't want to have a second highway to Kelowna today? I think we've been plagued by these closures ever since they were widening the highway, and it was closed. The highway was closed for months, and people were scrambling for ways to get around. We had this ferry running in 2008 for a little while. We've had closures in 2019 that closed the highway for months, and people are going on these Forest Service roads. So great idea to have a second highway, and our planners in 1975 thought so as well. And they included this secondary, you can see here, future secondary highway, which would have went up Vancouver Avenue and along the KPR right away. So again, not a lot of details of this plan, and I'm sure it wouldn't have gotten very far anyway, but it was part of the city's official community plan in that 1975 plan, and obviously it would have been a shame to have a highway, even a small one, going through this area, which is such a valued recreational corridor and part of the community today. Sticking around the agricultural areas, this is Queen's Park. This was an area that used to be Penticton Rodeo Grounds. Memorial Arena was built there, the swimming pool in the 1960s, the Penticton Trade and Convention Center, but for the most part it was sports field and recreation focused. There was a proposal to build the South Okanagan Event Center, and one of the challenges with that is what to do with the sports fields that were very well used, as well as the tennis bubble that was there. Yeah, that project supported by council. We borrowed a bunch of money. I think it's paid off now, which is great. And I think, say what you will about the facility, we have it here, and it brings a certain amount of value to the community. But the big question of the day was what to do with the sports fields that were gone. And this was the answer. I'm not sure how the decision came about, but this was the proposal. The city ended up buying 3 10-acre, sorry, they weren't quite 10 acres, but 3 farm parcels on the backside of Campbell Mountain, and made an application to the Land Commission to rezone and to allow sports fields to be on these farm properties here. So basically on that bench along there, that's just to orient you, that's Munson Mountain. So the Penticton sign is on the backside of that mountain there. This was the proposal, one of many proposals for these 3 farms to orient different sports fields. So there was some soccer stuff. There was another proposal with just baseball stuff, but this is what the proposal would have looked like: a large parking lot and then the sports fields. I think our recreation department was really excited about it because we could host tournaments, and it was part of that economic development strategy. But the land itself is meant for farming, and ultimately the Land Commission denied the proposal. They actually did approve it, or they did say we would consider a smaller section of the property for the sports field, so they didn't deny it outright. In true Land Commission fashion, they kind of split the difference and approved enough that it wouldn't really work. But so there was a re-proposal done with just 2 of the properties. I don't believe the application was ever sent to the ALC because there was a really strong lobby group at this point to save that land as farmland, and ultimately council's decision was to back away from that, and we ended up selling 2 of the 3 properties. We still own one of the properties, which has, I think, 3 or 4 rental houses on it, and was recently converted to a BMX facility in the interim until we find a longer term use for the site. And if you're wondering what happened to the ball fields, they were replaced through partnership with School District 67. One of them was replaced on Carmi School, and the other one is at Enchelac. So talked a bit about economic development strategies and how a lot of these plans get cooked up through the economic development lens. In the 1990s, golf resorts were king. Every sunny place that you could think of was wanting to have golf resorts, and this was the big economic development strategy to attract affluent retirees to your community and to really drive tourism. And Penticton was not immune from this fever. So we actually had our own golf task force, which created this lovely document, which is the Golf Course Development in Penticton, BC report from the task force. I don't know if anybody outside of the city has seen this, but it did review several different sites that would be acceptable for golf course development. It looked at very prominent sites, so Campbell Mountain, you'll see Campbell Mountain come up a few times in this presentation. Wiltsey Lands, Spiller Road actually had a proposal, not part of this, but further back there was a proposal to do a golf course there. Arrowleaf Resort and Casino, which I'll speak to in a moment, and then obviously the Golf and Country Club was the main golf course of the day. So I think as a fire break, golf courses might have been a great idea, but unfortunately, or fortunately, none of these ended up going forward. But there was some very detailed work done. Like, this is the Campbell Mountain concept plan, which would have taken a lot of the natural area, partly crown land, partly city-owned land on the backside of Campbell Mountain, and made a very grade challenged golf course, but a golf course nonetheless. This was the Arrowleaf development plan that had a championship 18-hole golf course, as well as a resort and casino. Along with golf courses, casinos were the other big economic development golden jewel in the 1990s, and the province was very, I'd say, discretionary in how they handed out these casino licenses back then. Now every town's got their own casino, but back in the 1990s, a casino license was a big deal. And I don't know how many of you lived here during those discussions. The Penticton Lakeside Resort had an application in, Penticton Indian Band had an application in, and there were about 4 of these destination casino licenses that were handed out at this time, and 2 of them ended up in Penticton. Both the Lakeside Resort and the Penticton Indian Band were approved to have a casino. Well, the partner that the Penticton Indian Band had said, well, if the Lakeside already has a hotel, so we're not going to go forward with this development. And this really hurt relationships with the PID because they felt that the province was unfair in the way that they handled this. They lost their partner. They couldn't find another one because of the competition of the Lakeside Resort, and the Lakeside Resort went forward. And so this development never ended up going forward. Again, you could probably do a large talk just on the politics of that one decision. But ultimately, the Penticton Indian Band Development Corporation, which isn't in operation anymore, but championed the lands that were meant for that 18-hole golf course into what is now Skaha Hills and Play Winery. And then the Wiltsey lands, if you're familiar, on the eastern hillsides, owned by a prominent historic family in the community, 300 acres of land. Wiltsey property was also identified as a golf resort. That land has now been rezoned as a comprehensive neighborhood, and we understand very soon to be purchased by a developer, and we could see development there as early as next year. One portion of the property is already under development. This is the south block of that, but yeah, no golf course. Who remembers the Pen? In, I believe it was 2011, the province made an announcement that they were going to build a new state-of-the-art correctional facility somewhere in the Okanagan to deal with criminals, I guess. Penticton was approached as one of the places that they wanted to see this be built, along with, I think it was Enderby. Summerland was also shortlisted, and we're solicited to make proposals. The city made a proposal on 2 sites, one on Campbell Mountain that the city owned, and one on an industrial property, and that's the Cantex gravel pit that is no longer in existence. So we submitted that application to the province, and then there was a lot of backlash about it. I think people were very uneasy about having a prison in the community for a lot of really good reasons, probably. I think the community was split. People saw it as, like in 2011, the economy was not what it is today. Unemployment was high, there was no development happening in the city, and I think people saw this as an opportunity for jobs and some economic development and construction. In the interim, ultimately though, there was a vote on it. There was a lot of people that were strongly opposed to having a prison, and a referendum, or sorry, a non-binding referendum or opinion poll was taken, and the community voted against it, and subsequently the application was withdrawn, or the proposal for Penticton was withdrawn. The decision was made to build a facility on Osoyoos Indian Band land just outside of Oliver. This is the facility now. I think it's the largest prison in BC for sure, and I think perhaps in Canada, and it's less than 20% full, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's very underutilized. I actually had the opportunity to do a tour of it a few years ago, and if you haven't done a tour of it, very uneasy walking through this. Like, don't ever go there if you on a tour, or certainly not otherwise. But yeah, it's a prison, but there's a great like metal shop and wood shop, and you can actually hire them to build you like garden gazebos and different things like that. But didn't end up in Penticton. The next area I want to go to is the Ellis Street corridor, and there's all sorts of plans that have been in the downtown and along Ellis Street. I'm just going to hit on a couple of them. This document was created in 2009 or 2010. It was never actually approved by City Council. I think it was in committee, and then an election happened and it sort of died on the vine a bit. It had some fairly controversial proposals in it, but also a very strong vision for what that Ellis Street corridor could be, having that performing arts center, picking up on the energy of the art gallery and creating a cultural corridor, interspersing some residential in there, and just really creating a sense of place along the Penticton Creek. Some of the more controversial, or I would say ambitious proposals in it were actually relocating the creek, so taking the creek and moving it to a different location just to get more development land. If that wasn't feasible, the other option was to actually move Ellis Street, so you could have those nice creek-facing properties have more land to be set back, and moving Ellis Street to where the lane is right now to create more development space. And that's really that's the scheme that you see here. So you'd move the street back to where the lane is, and then have a bunch of land available for development and more creek crossings. So very exciting vision that didn't come to pass, unfortunately. A lot of the concepts of that cultural plan actually did make it into our downtown plan, which was adopted a few years later in 2013. And the one I wanted to highlight from that plan, which didn't go forward, was the conversion of the bus barn. And if you don't know what the bus barn is on Ellis Street, it's an old bus fixing facility, repair shop that Greyhound had. The city ended up inheriting it, and it's a blue corrugated building. It's sort of stuck in the location it is, because if you ever took it back, it's so close to the creek you could never rebuild on the site. So we've been trying to find ways to reuse the building in ways that would have public benefit. During the development of the downtown plan, the idea was to bring another bridge crossing across, so bring that energy from Main Street, have the bridge crossing at the Kokanee statue, and then do a market, an indoor market. So take the energy from the Saturday market that was really growing at the time. That's when you saw the community market added, you saw the market moving from the park to closing down the street, and the market really growing in prominence. And so we're looking at ways to take that energy and making it year-round. Ultimately, the business case didn't quite pan out on it, but it's a bit of a shame, because I think it would have been great. Excuse me. This is the bus barn today. It probably needs a paint job, but you can see some of the work that the city's been doing around it to calm traffic on Ellis Street. Right now, the inside of it is all pickleball courts, so it is being used by, it's a great public use right now with the pickleball courts, but we'll see what happens into the future with that facility. Shifting now to, how are we doing on time? We're good. Shifting now to Marina Way. This was an area where there was lots of different proposals done. This is what Marina Way looked like in 1997. Who remembers the Purple Basil restaurant? It used to be down there. Fairly undeveloped parkland, but I think well used by the community. Lots of overgrown area there, and an area obviously being close to the waterfront, super valuable land. This was a plan that was done in the late 90s for this vision of waterfronts in Penticton, actually a very important document in Penticton's history. It saw a lot of investment done along our creeks and our waterfronts, and part of the vision for the Marina Way Park was embedded in that document there. But what really triggered the upgrades in this area was a development proposal from an architect on the corner of Vancouver Avenue and Abbott Street. You can see it sort of under construction there. Here's some of the initial plans. I know we're talking about projects that didn't go forward. This one did go forward, and this is what it looks like today. From an architectural perspective, really interesting building, lots of kind of outdoor space and indoor space and levels, and it kind of walks up the hill, but very complicated building from a construction perspective, but it's quite the landmark along Marina Way now. 2004, so you see the construction beginning there, and we started getting interest from other properties to redevelop during that time. So the next one that I want to share with you is the one for 2006, which was the Lake House. These were very, very high-end 4-story townhouses. Each townhouse had their own elevator in it. There was one commercial piece that was associated with it as well, and a nice scale in comparison to the terraces, which were a little bit higher up. Here's the site plan for that development and some renderings that were put together then. I'm going to show you some renderings that were done more recently, like the advances in digital representation of architecture. Just keep this one in mind, and then you'll see some of the ones in the future. But yeah. So this is what the proposal was for the lake houses. The city approved it. They did take out building permits, and construction began. And then the economic crisis and the liquidity crisis of 2008 kind of hit this project hard, and it was halted. 10 years later, not much change. You got that concrete in there. Moving next door to this property here. There was a proposal in 2007 for a 7-story apartment building that, again, fairly similar scale to the terraces next door, but would have been higher end condo building overlooking the lake. That previous one that I showed you was denied by council. The developers came back, their architects changed a few things, pushed a few sections of the building back, and this was ultimately approved by council. A development permit was issued for this, but the developer never went ahead with the project and ultimately sold the property. So the two development sites were actually consolidated into one larger development site with a local developer with some out-of-town partners, much more ambitious project, and the beach house was presented to council in 2022 in the summer. 10-story building on Marina Way, step down as you go closer to the terraces, and then a smaller apartment building on Vancouver Avenue. All told, it was between 99 and 101 units, depending on which version of the plans you looked at. But very well thought out design. I thought it took into consideration the neighboring development quite well. Lots of parking. See what I mean by the digital representations of the newer properties? Almost looks like a photograph. Ultimately though, council denied this development based on some concerns from the neighbors over loss of views, and that project will never be built, unfortunately. The developers did regroup, and they looked at some different ideas and have gone to council with a new proposal for townhouses, which was recently approved, and we understand will be beginning construction hopefully this year. The last section of projects that I wanted to share with you, I talked about the condo craze of the early 2000s, and Penticton participated in this in a big way. All sorts of outside investment money flooded into the city. I think you had Alberta doing really well. You had real estate in Vancouver doing really well, and people looking at Penticton as second home locations. And for whatever reason, we just had this massive amount of tower proposals, and very like Vancouver and Calgary style proposals that were made in Penticton that I think looking back didn't make any sense from an economic perspective, but there's half a dozen or so, or a little more than half a dozen on the screen here. I'm going to touch on a couple of them just for fun with you. So who remembers this building? Yeah, beautiful building. Yeah, 450 Martin Street. This was the Super Value, really cool architecture, this kind of swooping glulam beam structures. This was it in 1958. When my family first moved to Penticton, like this was the spot you would go to like Friday nights. My dad would take us down here, he'd go to the liquor store, we'd grab some snacks over here, and then there's Video Update, back when you could like rent videos. To be there. So yeah, this was the happening spot, and then obviously video stores don't exist anymore. The liquor store moved, and Super Value got knocked down for this proposal. So 23 stories. I'd say this is the biggest proposal that we've had in Penticton. The P2 development, Penticton Place, it was branded, and this had a little bit of everything for everybody. They were going to replace 200 spaces of public parking on site. They were going to build a grocery store to replace the Super Value. They were even going to replace the stained glass window, and then do 3 stories of 20-story towers on that site. Here's some renderings of what the building would look like from various areas in the community, from uplands looking west. This would be from Main Street and White Avenue, just towering over the downtown. And again, nothing like, we have some towers in Penticton at the 15-story, but certainly nothing of this scale, of the kind of glass and steel variety. And this was approved by council in 2009. And then about 5 minutes later, somebody found this document in the vault that said, hey, you actually can't build anything over 15 stories, depending on where you're at in the city, because of the airport zoning that was put in place in the 1960s. So this map, it wasn't this exact one, it was one, an older one that somebody twigged us to and said, yeah, do you know that there's this airport zoning that limits the height of any buildings? And the planners of the day were not aware of this document, and through all sorts of research and consulting with lawyers, and we realized that, yeah, if we approve that, or if we allow that development to go ahead, it had the potential of closing our airport. So working with the developer, and whether the development would have went ahead anyway is probably, yeah, I'll leave my opinion on that one aside, but ultimately this was a huge concern for the city, because we had entered into a development agreement with the developer. We'd approved all this zoning, and now we needed to find a way to walk it back, and that was a multi-year process to walk back that development approval. This is yeah, this is the site today, so obviously not a lot of progress on development of that site. Westminster Avenue, so this is 249 Westminster Avenue. Back in 2004, I think it was a Kia dealership there, number of automobile-oriented uses, repair shops operating on the site. It's the corner of Brunswick. Looking back at the site, it's a Kia dealership. Boom, another proposal, huge development called the Okanagan Breeze. A little bit less height than we saw with the P2. I think this was at 15 stories on 2 phases, but again, really ambitious. Ground floor retail, all sorts of parking within this podium with the towers above, and certainly something you would normally see down in Yaletown or in Calgary or larger urban centers. You're just starting to see this type of construction in Kelowna now, but Penticton, yeah, would have been really interesting to see if any of these projects went forward. Some shadow studies. So these were really high amenity projects because they were trying to market to the out-of-town, second home, resort style investors. So all these projects had pools and spas and hot tubs and all sorts of putting greens and different amenities attached to them. It was a two-phase project, and it was approved by City Council. It was put into our zoning bylaw as a comprehensive development zone and sits in our zoning bylaw up until very recently, but obviously never went forward. 10 years later, the developers, I don't think it made any sense economically. Obviously, if it did, they would have went forward, but yeah, never happened. The site was subsequently sold and subdivided, and we had the Mission Group built a purpose-built rental of 75 units on the corner of Brunswick and Westminster, and really starting to see the contribution to the downtown of this scale and this style of building, with some commercial fronting the street and probably a more appropriately scaled height for downtown Penticton. We have Wayne and Frida. Eris has moved to that location, so we saw the conversion of some of that automobile-oriented uses into different uses on the site. This one's one of my favorites of this period because it's, I don't want to call it an improbable project, but I think looking at it objectively, you can see the size of this property and the shape of it. This is a remnant of the railway that used to go through here that altered a lot of the parcels through downtown Penticton. So we had this one parcel with a small building on it that had auto detailing shop on it. The owner, I think, went to some architectural firms just to see, hey, if we wanted to maximize development potential on this site, what would it look like and what can we get the city to approve? And this is what we're talking about, 13 stories on that small piece of property. Might make sense in Manhattan or something like that. Whether you can make that work in Penticton, obviously not. It was approved we did issue a development permit for this. I don't think it was at the full height. There was some challenges with parking. They had a few story of underground parking and then 3 stories of parking to try to make it work on that small site to get the height. There was actually a deal that was being negotiated with the city to lease some of the lane and close that and create some plaza space. But I mean, it would have been a really cool building if it had gone forward, and I think it was fun probably from an architect's perspective to try to envision how to use that awkward space and build something that's going to give you lots of development potential on it. So yeah, some really good vision for the site that would have had some commercial associated with it and that outdoor patio area. But again, it wasn't right downtown, so you're kind of pulling some of the commercial energy away from the downtown, but was approved. And ultimately, whether they couldn't find financing for it or didn't want to go forward with the project, this is what the site looks like today. And I think this is the last one, and then we can open up for questions, or if people have more to the story to share. I know there's some people that may have more to the story to share.
on some of these developments that I've shared for you. But the last one I want to share is the Ogopogo Motel. This site's had a few different proposals on it in the past. This property here, this is from 2004, the Vanderzam land. So this is coming on the highway into the city. That property was sold, and there was a proposal to do what ultimately turned into the Riverside Village, which was a commercial development, which turned out really nice. And it got other people excited for development in the area, including the Ogopogo Motel and RV Resort. It was bought by a Vancouver developer, actually a planner from the city of Vancouver, that moved into development and really, again, took that mindset of like, hey, what can we do to maximize construction on this? And bear in mind, this is absolutely the swampiest land that you can build on. This is part of the old, before they channelized the old Okanagan River, it used to meander through here. So swamplands, a small property, but the architects and developer of the day did a scheme that had over 240, I think, units on it, over 15 stories in height on that property. Again, airport came into play. Didn't completely kibosh the development, but did impact some of the height that they could have on the development. But the plans did move along to a fairly detailed level, and again, was approved by the city, but never ended up going forward. And then we see some of the other properties around here developing, not in that high-rise format, because the ground is really difficult to build on here, but you saw the Riverside townhomes go in, and then this is the current proposal for that Ogopogo site that was approved by council, and we understand should be under construction fairly soon. So again, probably more appropriately scaled for Penticton at that 5-story height. See what I mean? Like the digital, like this is not a photograph. Digital representations of architecture work is quite spectacular these days. So you can kind of get a sense of what's going to go there now, as opposed to that large high-rise that was proposed in 2010. And that's it for me. Yeah, lots of presentation, or lots of projects that we've had proposed from the cities, from developers, landowners, and lots. I mean, we're seeing astronomical growth in the city. We're seeing lots of developments go forward, but the ones I highlighted today are ones that didn't go forward. So thank you.